My name is Shania Butler, and today I'll be interviewing Mr. Tom Binger. So, what branch in the military did you serve in?
Served in the United States Marine Corps.
What made you choose that branch?
Well, I thought it was the best one. It was the best out of all the branches, at that time, so that's what I wanted.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted.
Where were you living at the time you joined the military?
Where was I living? I was living here in Peoria, Illinois. I was a senior in high school at the time that I enlisted, and about 4 days after I graduated, was on a train going to Chicago, and from Chicago to San Diego, California, to basic training and points beyond.
What do you recall from your first days of the service?
What do I recall? Not a whole lot. When I can't speak about the other branches of the service, but in the Marine Corps, right from day one, you know who's in charge, and it's not you. So I would have to say I felt lost, trying to figure out why I did what I did, and I don't know, it just got worse, a lot worse before it got better.
Tell me about your boot camp experiences.
Well, once again, I think in the Marine Corps especially, they tell you everything that you need to know. Right from day one, when you arrive at your basic, when we arrived at the training station in San Diego, we received our first military haircut, and they we took all our clothes off and put on our first issue of military gear. We were assigned to wait in a barracks until our platoon had formed, which was about a week. And after that week, when we had formed our platoon and company, then training actually started. So I would say, all in all, it was quite an experience.
How did you get through it?
Day by day. It became very important to say your prayers at night. Talk to the man above and let him give you the courage to go day to day. While somebody's on your case 24 hours, even when you're sleeping, you can see the man right in your face. So crazy.
Do you remember your instructors?
Yes, I do. His name was Sergeant Payton. He was an E5, and he was a mean man. But he could sing cadence, which I'll never forget. Cadence and precision is very important in the Marine Corps drill, so it was installed early. And you practiced every single day.
Which war did you serve in?
I served in Vietnam.
What was your job?
I was a radio operator. I worked in the Direct Air Control Center, which was more or less the communication link between the ground units and the air support that they needed. We were their first call whenever they needed any kind of an air support mission, whether it be resupply, helicopters, or whatever. They came through us first, and we We called the appropriate airfield. They scrambled or sent the flight in motion and gave them to us when they were on station, and we made sure they got to the right unit in the field. Hope that makes sense.
Did you see combat?
Some, not a whole lot. I was probably pretty fortunate. But like all Marines, you have your duties. You will do your patrolling and you will do your guard duty and such things. So I fired my weapon in anger only a few times, and I was fortunate that that was it, you know. So some of the fellas lived out in the bush most of the time, but our unit did not. So we still went through some of the same things. But
what are some of your most memorable experiences?
Well, I would have to say when I arrived in Vietnam in 1966, I landed in Da Nang, on the Da Nang airfield, and it was not what I expected. You know, you expected all kinds of gunfire and a war going on and everything, but it wasn't that way. We flew in on a civilian airline and got off the plane, and here's all these soldiers, whether they were whatever branch of service, going about their duties. You know, 50 guys over here marching up and down the tarmac, maybe airplanes landing, guys coming and going from Vietnam, just a busy hub, you know. Kind of shocked me there. And then after I had been in country for about 3 months, they sent me up north to a place called Dang Ha, which was probably 8 or 10 miles south of the demilitarized zone. And every day we would receive what we called incoming, and that could be rockets, mortars, or whatever, but they continually shelled the base. And that's always unnerving because you don't really know where it's coming from. You know, at any point in time, it could land, you know, right where you're at. So, kind of shocking, I guess. But I'll never forget it the first time.
Were you a prisoner of war?
Never was. No, ma'am.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
Well, like everyone who served, I received the Vietnam campaign, Vietnam service ribbons, National Defense Medal, and I got the Good Conduct ribbon. I don't know how, but I did. Took me a little longer than the allotted 3 years, but I finally made it. So, but nothing really special that I can think of. Maybe, you know.
Where did you get them?
Where? Well, actually, the Vietnam ribbons, campaign ribbon and the service ribbon, were given to everyone who served in Vietnam. And the National Defense ribbon was given to anyone who serves in the military during a time of war or crisis. And the Good Conduct Medal is what a person receives if he has a good record for 3 years. So, where? Well, toward the end of my enlistment in 1968, I think they finally caught up. So,
what was your rank in the military?
my rank was Lance Corporal E3, which, well, somebody's got to do the dirty work. So, unless you're a non-commissioned officer or E4 or above, if you're below that rank, you're the guy that gets stuck doing the mess duty or KP and the guard duty and all this other stuff. So that's that was me.
How did you stay in touch with your family while you were away?
How did I keep in touch with my family? By letter. We did not really have the communications that they have today. You know, communication was to write, and that's what we did. So.
What was the food like?
Well, food was terrible, to be completely honest. They try to give you a hot meal as often as they can, maybe once a day or once every couple of days. And I remember specifically when I was up at Camp Carroll in 1967, which is, maybe 5 or 10 miles east east of Quezon and close to the Cambodian border. They had an area set aside for their, not a cafeteria, but their mess hall. And what it was a wooden shack, and inside the building they had some picnic tables. Well, when they would get word that they were going to have a helicopter fly in some hot food, there would be a detail that would have to bring the picnic tables outside so that they could set their food up on it. You know, around the area there were trenches, so if you decided that you wanted something hot to eat, you would get in line with whatever you had, maybe a tray or whatever. To get your food, you'd have to take it to a trench and sit there and eat, because the North Vietnamese knew what our schedule was. And every time they seen a helicopter coming around, they knew that there would be a gathering of troops. And they knew the area, so you had to get your food and get in the trenches and just wait for it to come, you know. So, luckily they never got us.
Did you have plenty of supplies?
Well, I would have to say we had what we needed. We did not have excess. But if you needed new jungle utilities or fatigues or boots or something like that, they were available. Food, if nothing else, you could have sea rations, which came in a box. So, basically, yeah, ammunition, I guess we had that. But one thing they were kind of short on was water. And it seemed like the farther north that you got, the less water was available. They had these big fuel bladders for what they used fuel for around the airfields. They would fill them with water, not fuel, of course, but they would fill them full of water and drop them. In our area, they had little spigots on it, and you would have to run up there, get your canteen or whatever, fill them up, give the next guy a chance. Or they would have what they called a water buffalo, which was a water tanker, and that had spigots on it, and they'd drive it up and park it, leave it for a week or whatever, run up and once again fill your canteens or do whatever. So water was kind of in short supply.
Tell me about the stress or pressure you experienced.
Stress or pressure? Well, I would say there's always pressure to perform your duties, regardless of what it was. You depended on everyone around you, and everyone depended upon you. So if you were not doing what you were supposed to do, it could have dire consequences, to one of your fellow Marines, and that's not acceptable. So you always try to do a good job, perform well.
How do people entertain themselves?
Well, how does a young man entertain himself? You know, you have to remember everybody there. I would imagine the average age was probably 20 or below. Play cards, write letters, read, did a lot of reading. I would say smoke dope, but that's probably not a good idea. But it was prevalent. So, just anything you could, if you had some liquor, booze, whatever, that was entertainment. But we're not allowed to go out on town to do things, so everything had to take place on base. So,
Do you recall any unusual events?
did I call in my what?
Do you recall any unusual events?
Unusual? Well, I guess it could be called unusual in that in late 1967, there was a siege going on at a place called Payton. And to the north and east was a fire base called Camp Carroll. Well, the unit that I was with, we were assigned to go to Camp Carroll and establish a direct air control center, which was kind of unusual because the place was being bombarded daily. And you just had to, you know, try to fill sandbags and stay out of the way, not get hit. It was a little confusing at the time, but interesting nonetheless for a young man.
Do you have photographs from when you were in the service?
Did I have what?
Photographs?
That's the one thing that I regret. I did not take very many pictures, but I had some friends who did, and those pictures I have at home. But personally, I did not, and I do regret that.
What did you think of the officers or fellow soldiers?
Well, like any branch of the service, I think that the officers, if they had some experience, were good and they knew their job. But the new ones, your second lieutenants or whatever that are first in country, they're new to the whole thing also, the whole scene. And they had to depend upon the enlisted men, which, you know, I think caused the enlisted men to mature a little faster as opposed to the officers. Some of them we had, you know, they got to the point where they would almost totally depend on the enlisted instead of taking charge themselves. So, you know, have great respect for my fellow Marines, I'll have to say that.
Tell me about the day your service ended.
The day my service ended, what was it like? Well, excluding Vietnam, my last day of service, when I came back from Vietnam, I was stationed in Beaufort, South Carolina. And I had less than a year to do, but I'll tell you what, when that last day came, oh man, it was probably one of the best days of my life. Bar none, except getting married, I guess.
What did you do in the days and weeks afterward?
In the days and weeks after I had gotten out of the service, actually, I came back home right away, And I took about a month off, just kind of laid around, tried to catch up with things, figure out what was going on. And then I went out looking for a job. And at that point in time, 1969 or even the early 70s, this area had quite a bit of industry and things, so it was not really that hard for a young man to get a job. So I ended up at a place called Caterpillar, tractor company at the time. Stayed there until I retired.
Did you make any close friendships while in the service?
Yes, I did. I did. I have many friends, but one in particular. He was a guy from California. His name was Steve Brown, and him and I went to radio school together. We went through Okinawa and into Vietnam when we were stationed together, and we became very close. But after I had gotten out of the service, he stayed in. But every 6 months or a year, he would call and we would talk for, oh God, maybe an hour or two, and then finally plan to get together somewhere, usually maybe St. Louis or Kansas City. We'd come halfway or whatever. Stayed close until he finally took his life. I guess it got to him. So, miss him terribly.
Are you involved in any veterans organizations?
Today, yes, I am. I am involved with the American Legion, Post 2 here in Peoria. I'm on their honor guard and their color guard. I am still involved with the union, United Auto Workers, Local 974, in their retiree chapter. I'm the secretary there. And West Central Illinois Labor Council, Retirees Division, I'm the vice president. So still involved with things, and I think it's important that a person stay involved. Because the older you get, the easier it is just to kind of sit down and watch TV or do your electronic things, you know, so don't want to fall into that trap.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Did my military experience influence my life? Is that, or? Well, of course, I think so. Your military experience instills in you a discipline, and I think you carry that discipline throughout your life, and it helps you stay on track.
How did your service and experiences affect your life?
Well, right now, I think, like I had said, it instills in you a discipline to try and stay focused. It motivates you to do the right thing and know the difference between what you should do and what you should not do. And if you get caught doing what you're not supposed to be doing, then you deserve whatever punishment, you know, is levied against you. So, fair play, I suppose, would be part of an answer.
Well, it was nice interviewing you, and thank you for sitting here.
Well, hey, thank you very much for the interview. Been a pleasure.